Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. Today's show is about antagonism, and we're going to talk about how best to achieve said antagonism. So let's start with Richard Wolff. He's pretty antagonistic. And I had this idea from yesterday that we need to talk about workers in the Rust Belt.
The last 50 years has been the systematic undoing of the New Deal. The New Deal, look, it came at a moment of capitalist collapse, 1929 and everything that happened, and you had at that time, in the United States, as in every other country, a split. Those who wanted reform and those who wanted a revolution. Remember, 1929 is only 12 years after the revolution in Russia. Everybody knew about a revolution in Russia that had succeeded, had had the revolution, had withstood the attack of the Western countries, including the United States, withstood the Civil War, came out of World War I, and with a new, whatever they called, socialist communist government. So that was real. And in the struggle between Roosevelt, representing the business community, and the socialist, communists, and the CIO, the people from below, the question was reform or revolution, as it always is.
So, if the question is reform or revolution, as it always is, and we need not to just leave the power in the hands of the oligarchs, but we need to take it away better than FDR did. We need the grubby populists in the Rust Belt. We need people in battleground states, or all the reforms that we're trying to achieve will be for naught because they'll just be undone. I'm going to put this link, or I'm going to put this clip that I was just playing, I'm going to put that at the end because the sound quality will be better and you can watch the whole clip. But for now, I just want to say, if we're going to get antagonistic, we need the swing voters. We need the people who could, without any weird twinges of conscience, vote for either Bernie Sanders or for Donald Trump. It's confusing to a lot of the voting class diehard Democrats, but this phenomenon needs to be understood and addressed if we're going to be as antagonistic as we need to be with the oligarchs. Now, speaking of antagonism, Jeremy Tobak in Medium lays out an entire case for really, maybe he doesn't call it this, but grubby populism. He was talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez not being willing to go on Fox News, and he disagrees with that because he believes that we need to address the grubby populists and include them in the movement to achieve Medicare for all, and what I don't remember if he says this, but also I believe, for the ecocide that we're facing. So here's Jeremy. Sanders, on the other hand, understands that if we want to deliver the greatest guarantee of reproductive rights in U.S. history, the way to do that is to build a big cross-cultural coalition to win Medicare for all. If we want to win serious criminal justice reform and guarantee living wages, we need to do the same. That means we can't afford to write off entire segments of our populace who we may disagree strongly with on other issues, but also have material stakes in working with us to win those transformative policies. So woke signaling is not going to work. I was in Bernie or Bust, Facebook group called Bernie or Bust. I'm not sure they're really Bernie or Bust because they say you can't vote third party. You have to stay in the fold. And we talked about that yesterday. That's called sheepdogging, guys. But anyway, other than that, they allow some pretty good discussions in this group. I think I've only been kicked out once, and then they let me back in again. So this is a post that generated heat and light yesterday. I said, stop talking about abortion. Stop talking about racism. Stop talking about religion. Stop talking about identity politics. First, let's solve the issues of economic justice and climate crisis, and then see what's left to solve. One generally reasonable person in that group blocked me over saying this. I was mean to him. I told him that that he was spouting unicorn piss or something in my very reasonable way of arguing. And he got mad. But what I think he was mad about is that he was not willing to let go of identity politics. I think people who have found a lot of leverage by doing that don't want to give it up and really just focus in sharply on economic justice and climate crisis. And so that there are 75 comments. There are people that are agreeing and a few people that at first were disagreeing, and then I think came around, especially when we talked about the press secretary of Bernie Sanders. I can't remember her name now, but she was talking about intersectionality, and I covered that on a show a few episodes ago. So I'm going to close this window so it stops beeping at me, and we'll go on with the idea that identity politics is getting in the way of forming coalitions with the grubby populists that could really back down the oligarchs in the way FDR wasn't able to. I think we need to bring all hands on deck, coal miners, truck drivers, everybody who may not agree with the woke signaling of the left, but nevertheless are on board with Medicare for all, economic justice for workers, pernicious trade agreements like NAFTA or TPP. There are a lot of people who typically are traditional conservatives who still are on board with economic justice and even with climate crisis. So that's why I brought this discussion in. Please join the discussion. Please join this Facebook group called Bernie or Bust. Let me show you what it looks like. You can see the picture in the group. This is the picture in the group. If you see this picture, you're in the right group, and I urge you to join it. All right. Now, let's go back here to the antagonistic Jeremy. He says we need to not alienate people, entire segments of our populace who we may disagree strongly with on other issues. For those who inevitably concern troll universalists for catering to sexists or racists, that's not the case. Bernard won over a Fox News town hall with Medicare for all, not bigotry. And it may also surprise self-righteous Dems to learn that discrimination isn't the sole province of Trump supporters. There are bigots who support HRC. There are bigots who support Bernie. And to be fair, you have to acknowledge that. This is America in 2019, after all, not pluralist paradise. The question is not what people believe, beautiful or loathsome, but can we enlist them to fight in solidarity to win life-improving material guarantees for everyone, particularly the most vulnerable? I heard a good point, and I'll try to figure out where I heard it, but I have to say it here. When you look at typical Democrats, the woke Democrats, they are sympathetic to the plight of people lower on the socioeconomic ladder. Even if they're elitist, even if they're somewhat bigoted, they have sympathy, and that's the woke signaling. That's where they will pay lip service, really, to the issues that make them feel better about themselves. Gay marriage, for example, or abortion. And I'm in favor of gay marriage and abortion rights, but I also believe that there's some condescension here and that we need to get past pity to true solidarity. Again, I'm acknowledging that I didn't come up with this idea, and I'll try to figure out where I heard it. It was in the last week or so. We need to get, I think it was probably Michael Brooks, but we need to get past pity to true solidarity. It was Michael Brooks. Now I'm remembering. And so if we do that, we've got people who may not agree with us on everything. And we have people, if you're an elitist, who are lower than you on the socioeconomic ladder. And we need to get past pity and get to solidarity with people of color, with women who have been oppressed, with immigrants, with everybody who people in inner city schools who go to schools that we wouldn't want our kids to go to, and so on. We need to form solidarity. We need to say what Bernie says and mean it, that if any of us suffer, we all suffer. I think the Democratic Party has been at least as terrible as the Republican Party when it comes to feeling everybody's pain. People talk about bleeding hearts, and that's pity. Bleeding heart liberalism is pity. It's not solidarity. So if we want to be able to form a coalition of solidarity that can overthrow the power of the oligarchs and then put in place a system that never allows them to come back and control us again, we need solidarity, not pity. And we need to work with everybody who wants economic justice and wants to avoid ecocide and so on. But economic justice is at the root of almost every problem that we face. A Sanders presidency with a commitment to unifying public goods over divisive woke idealism would not only improve the material conditions of everyday people of all kinds, it would do irreplaceable ideological work. His leadership and example would model something to young people that they have never experienced, effectively training our populace in how to be political. At the end of 4 years, we might even have a movement. Just as importantly, young reps like AOC would learn via Bernard and their own participation in our solidaristic struggle to become effective universalist leaders. Without Sanders, however, that window closes. Now, here is an analyst on the Hill Rising who sees it this way too.
What we have seen is that these things turn out to be General Duds in terms of moving public opinion.
He's talking about impeachment, so it's a General Dud. And then the argument against impeachment that follows here by the analyst speaks to the idea that we need to include everyone in the coalition who's willing to be included.
And we already know what the end result is going to be after about a 6 to 8 week trial in which these Democratic senators are going to be forced to sit there for 6 days a week during the most critical phase of the campaign. So it's a negative impact from our perspective. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been a negative impact. I mean, this has been the high point, right? This is where they were supposed to lay out their case.
Inez Stepman.
Right? And what they've really succeeded in doing is just solidifying everybody who didn't like Donald Trump before into the impeachment camp.
And those are the grubby populists in Rust Belt states.
Seeing in swing states, right, the states that Democrats are going to have to win back, is that people are not interested in this, that they don't want to see this focus on impeachment, and frankly that I think there's this element of we're going to vote, we have already started the campaign. If you think he did something wrong, then use that on the campaign trail, and I think that would have been much more effective. I think a censure vote would have been much more effective. You might have been able to peel off some Republicans for that, but as you said, going for impeachment, now we're going to move to the Senate, where we're going to bring out all of the things that have not been talked about that look better for the president, where we're going to talk about Joe Biden and Hunter, and we're going to bring all the senators who are currently on the trail back home to watch that happen.
She's got this solid argument, and what we need to see is that when the grubby populists watch Nancy Pelosi on television and they watch Joe and Hunter Biden get dragged through the mud, as they deserve to do, they're going to say, hey, these Democrats, I don't know if I can vote Democrat, especially not in the primaries. Maybe if Bernie gets nominated, I'll vote for Bernie, but he's the only one I can stomach. And I'm looking at all these other people in the Senate, these Democrats in the Senate, and they're loathsome, and I don't see why I should ever vote for them. It's not a good deal. This impeachment proceeding is not helping Bernie's cause, and it's not helping Democrats, because to the grubby populists in swing states, they don't want to hear about this stuff. They just want their jobs back. They just want their Medicare. They want to not go broke when they have any kind of a medical crisis. They don't want to keep living paycheck to paycheck. They want their wages to go up. And those are the issues we need to focus on. Those are the issues that Bernie focuses on. And as Jeremy said in his article, focusing that way will be the tide that lifts all the ships. Now, this article, let me read the quote from it, and then I'll go and show it to you. Since the 1970s, parties of the left center have bled working class support all over the industrialized world, with millions of blue-collar Democrats, social democrats, and labor voters giving way to a new class of highly educated professionals. So we're leaving behind, and we have been for quite a while, the grubby populists, the Democrats. I said we. I'm not a Democrat after the primaries. But I have been a Democrat since I was 18 years old, and then I exited after they cheated Bernie. And unless they can unrig their system to allow insurgent populists into the fold, I will continue to be on the fringes. Who knows? Maybe I'd be a Republican someday and run as a leftist, an ultra-leftist Republican. That might be interesting. Because really there is, the working class has been left out, and the working class has been the backbone of leftist movements until the last 70 years or so. The end of class voting. Chuck Schumer's notorious boast about trading blue-collar Democrats for college-educated Republicans accurately captured the strategy that produced both the Democratic Party's disastrous 2016 defeat and its limited victory in 2018. But the commitment was not just an unusually candid confession of the party's strategic priorities, it was also a neutral description of a much larger process that began long before Schumer reached the Senate. Now, this article by Matt Karp came out, I think, in October. Yeah, October 14th. Is this the future liberals want? And I remember talking about it a little bit, but I have to bring it back because it so perfectly fits what I'm trying to say today. Since the 1970s, parties of the left center have bled working class support all over the industrialized world. Social democrats, all right, we got that. Schumer's own political career, which began at age 23 when he graduated from Harvard Law School and won election to the New York State Assembly in the same year, eat your heart out, Pete Buttigieg, is just one illustration of this shift. In fact, Schumer-like politicians, to include Pelosi there too, since I already mentioned her, and the professional class voters they represent, the elitist suburbanites they represent, have become the active leadership and core constituency within center-left parties from Brooklyn to Berlin to Sydney. Thomas Piketty has dubbed this new configuration a clash between the Brahmin left, educated professionals defined by their cosmopolitan virtues, and the merchant right, business leaders committed to the ruthless maximization of profit. Under this arrangement of forces, working class voters have either dwindled into quiescent adjuncts of the professional class left, gravitated toward right-wing populism, or dropped out of politics altogether. And this segment of the population, all over the world, but also in the Rust Belt, is the segment that we need to bring to the cause of economic justice. And that, again, is the tide that lifts all the ships. Thomas Piketty's research shows you that it used to be that labor was left. Unions were left. We have such sorry excuses for unions now. Their leaders are corrupt. The leaders of my union are terribly corrupt. And they just do whatever the oligarchs want. And they're like the Count of Mirabeau that I mentioned yesterday, Gabriel Riquetti, who just try to take, they lead the opposition, and what they do in their leading, they're being paid by the oligarchs to lead the opposition in a less clashy way, in a more moderate way. And that's what our union leaders have been doing. So we need to get them the fuck out of the way, and we need to have a true labor movement that backs up the defeat of the oligarch rule that we've had. And the reason we've had it is because the leftist parties have stopped representing workers and have shifted over to these Brahmin and and merchant kinds of people, and they've left out the workers. But it wasn't always this way. Across the 20th century, it was this politics of class that has structured the great and lasting achievements of European social democracy, from Britain's National Health Service to the Scandinavian welfare state. In the United States, class voting produced the political coalitions that delivered the New Deal and the Civil Rights Acts. Here, as elsewhere, the decisive energy for reform came about through working class organization, chiefly in labor and social movements. Does our current Democratic Party support labor movements? Does it support bottom-up revolution against the oligarchy? No, because of Citizens United and because of other developments, our Democratic politicians are bought and paid for. And so they're no way are they going to represent labor. They're not going to mobilize labor. They're not going to be organizer-in-chief of labor. They are right there with Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. They want to harness labor and keep them quiet. Our education system does the same thing, but don't get me started on that. Now, here is an article by Megan Day and Matt Karp about these same voters, these Rust Belt voters. For Democrats still scarred by the memory of November 2016, it is easy to imagine that Donald Trump is an electoral juggernaut, endowed with awesome and occult powers. But the truth is closer to the opposite. Trump is a historically unpopular leader who won a narrow electoral college victory over an equally unpopular rival. And the reason he won is because his equally unpopular rival, Hillary Clinton, sucked in the Rust Belt. She had no energy there and no trust from voters there. Beyond a core of diehard Republicans, most Americans don't like Trump at all. Since his first few months in office, Trump's overall approval rating has hovered between 38 and 42%, making him by far the most consistently disliked president in modern U.S. history. George H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter, the last two incumbents to lose an election, had much better numbers than Trump over their first 3 years in office. Even in the key swing states where he defeated Hillary Clinton, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, Trump's approval rating has been consistently underwater for over a year now. Trump can be beaten, and the way to do it involves winning three key groups of voters in these Rust Belt battlegrounds. First, the Democrats and independents who backed Obama twice before turning to Trump, and some of these are the Bernie or Trump voters I've been talking about. Second, Obama voters who declined to vote in 2016, and third, the even larger group of Americans who do not typically vote at all. I want to include in this a fourth group. I want to include people who have never voted for Obama who also support Bernie Sanders. And I'd say a lot of these are included in Hillary's basket of deplorables. I would say they're socially conservative and perhaps bigoted. I would say, though, that the Democrats, the elitist Democrats who live in suburbs are equally bigoted when it comes to wanting inner city kids to go to the schools their kids go to. So I'd say that there's no shortage of bigotry in either party, but it's more blatant and overt probably in these Rust Belt voters who have never voted for a Democrat, but who still, nevertheless, support Bernie Sanders. There is reason to believe that on purely hard-headed electoral grounds, Sanders is the Democrat with the best chance to win back disaffected Obama supporters in the Rust Belt and to defeat Donald Trump with Rust Belt voters who have voted Republican and have voted for Republicans for the last decades, who nevertheless don't see Trump helping them get their jobs back. There was a clip I showed a couple days ago, Kyle Kulinski clip, where he says that Bernie is poised to kick ass in the Rust Belt. He's going to defeat Donald Trump because he said people in the Rust Belt aren't stupid. They can see that Donald Trump did not deliver on his promises. So even if they never voted for Obama, I'd say we need to include them in the coalition if they can see that Bernie Sanders is a true populist instead of a pretend populist. Now, the last idea here, and then I'm going to go to that clip that I teased you with at the beginning. Obama insider confirms former president ready to back whoever wins 2020 nomination, even Bernie Sanders. I want to warn you that this is a blatant lie. Barack already tipped his cards. He already showed us that he will intervene on behalf of whoever is anointed by the time it gets that far, July, but probably before July. And there's no way in hell he's going to back Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is an existential threat to his legacy of neoliberalism. So there's no way this can be true. And so don't be fooled by this. Barack Obama is never going to back Bernie Sanders. That's just silly to even think that. And so as you see, when Buttigieg fades, when Warren fades, and then when Biden fades, all hell is going to break loose. You're going to see Barack and Hillary and John Cowan of Third Way and Neera Tanden of Center for American Progress. You're going to see David Brock, the hit dog. You're going to see CAA, the talent agents. They're all going to come unglued. The whole machine of neoliberalism is going to lose their shit when Bernie wins or gets close to winning the nomination. And so I just want to end, before I jump to the Richard Wolff clip, I just want to make sure you understand. The only reason they're doing this is to sheepdog. These are professional sheepdogs. They want anyone who says they will support Bernie Sanders, or someone like Cenk who says, I endorse Bernie Sanders, they're still sheepdogs. Cenk Uygur is a sheepdog. They want the Bernie people in the Democratic fold, so they're willing to pay lip service to Bernie, and they're relying, like good controlled opposition does, they're relying on the machine in place that keeps out insurgent populists. They're relying on that machine to deny Bernie, and then they'll say, well, look, we can't have Donald Trump. We can't have Donald Trump. But these people that I've been talking about for this whole show aren't afraid of Donald Trump. They'll vote directly for Donald Trump if Bernie is cheated. So you're not gonna win. All you're gonna do is keep us in the fold, keep us in the Democratic fold, and you're gonna make sure that we have oligarchy rule for the foreseeable future, like we've had for 60 or 70 years until now. We're going to have more of Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, both Bushes, and Jimmy Carter, and Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. We're going to have more neoliberal rule. I need to preserve this idea by Richard Wolff and hopefully refer back to it often. So here we go.
Years, switch to the United States. The last 50 years has been the systematic undoing of the New Deal. The New Deal, look, it came at a moment of capitalist collapse, 1929 and everything that happened, and you had at that time, in the United States, as in every other country, a split. Those who wanted reform and those who wanted a revolution. Remember, 1929 is only 12 years after the revolution in Russia. Everybody knew about a revolution in Russia that had succeeded, had the revolution, had withstood the attack of the Western countries, including the United States, withstood the Civil War, came out of World War I, and with a new, whatever they called, socialist communist government. So that was real. And in the struggle between Roosevelt, representing the community, the business community, and the socialist communists and the CIO, the people from below, the question was reform or revolution, as it always is. And revolution was defeated. Reform was what we got. So
I tried to say that on yesterday's show. It's still yesterday, but I tried to say that in this deal making, FDR didn't dismantle the capitalist class, and they've been working ever since with a vengeance to dismantle the reforms that happened after FDR's era, after World War II.
We got Social Security, unemployment compensation, first minimum wage, and a federal jobs program. I mean, to focus on the big four. Okay, we got that. That's like social democracy. We got it. But what we didn't do was prevent the forces that are committed to undoing it from being preserved being preserved in their position as the capitalists who own the enterprises and draw the profits of work into their hands. And they have used those profits ever since to undo the New Deal, to make
Citizens United. They've been using the power they have been amassing hand over fist since Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher particularly, to keep the machinery of oppression going.
The minimum wage a joke of insufficiency, to get rid of the whole idea of public employment as a national commitment. I mean, we just went through a crisis, didn't even discuss it as a real option, and we're trying to erode Social Security and unemployment compensation. They've done a really good job. But there's a lesson in this, and I don't think history will allow us to not draw that lesson. And the lesson is, yes, revolution was defeated, we got reform. And we have learned that reform without revolution is inherently insecure and will be taken back. And I think, even though many people couldn't put it into words, the following is the conclusion that working classes, American as well as French, have drawn, and that confront Bernie. The working class is not about to go out and fight for the next 10 years to establish another New Deal, a green one this time, and then confront having not taken the steps to prevent it from being undone the way they're not. If you ask them to struggle for social democracy, they're going to say to you in so many words, we're not doing it because we've been there and we've done that and it doesn't work. We are not going to do that again. Well, then what would they do? They would take a step if it meant the reforms plus the removal of the capacity of the capitalist class to undo it.
There you go. Thank you, Richard Wolff. Effing brilliant. All right. So I get excited about this. Let me show you this little picture. Bernie or Trump voters in the Rust Belt virtually guarantee that no corporate sock puppet can win the general election. And this is the history of Thomas Piketty. This is facts, Jack. So wake up, share it with your neighbors. It's not going to be told even in leftist media. This story isn't going to be told even there. So it's up to you. Subscribe, share, please, and keep on burning. Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board.